Chapter 19. The Foundation of Spiritualism, Clairvoyance, Mediumship, Telepathy, and Intuition. The phenomena of spiritualism and the belief of the devotees of that religion are both expressions of the law of mentalism. It is the spiritualistic belief that at the death or destruction of the physical body, the soul, mind, enters into a space and from that indefinite position communicates with and influences souls that are still attached to earthly bodies. It has been clearly demonstrated that messages have been received by the living that had every evidence of having come from one who had departed from the body. These messages demonstrate the existence and life of the mind and intelligence after the destruction of the body. These souls, being invisible to the physical eye, make themselves known to others through the law of mentalism. That a soul may communicate with the living and in return receive messages from them, it must use the same means and the same process it used while on earth. Otherwise, its communications could not be recognized. Mentalism is the universal law that governs all intelligence and the transmission of the same from mind to manner or from brain to brain. The power of mentalism is not limited by the narrow confines of this small earth, but is capable of traveling through illimitable space and of influencing the inhabitants of other worlds also. The spiritualists use the same power in sending and receiving messages that every man uses in communicating with his fellow men. They, however, select certain persons who they call mediums to send and receive messages from the souls that have departed. These persons act in the capacity of operators in sending and receiving messages for others. This ability of the medium is due to his great power of concentration. By it, he is able to quickly tune himself in harmony with the mentalism of souls that are in and also those that are out of the body. This ability is not due to the spirituality of his nature, for as a rule, professional mediums are not noted for their spiritual development, the material elements being rather more in evidence. The medium is simply the machine used in transmitting and receiving messages. Spiritualists have laid themselves liable to much censure and criticism as a result of attributing to departed souls all messages they receive. The reason for this is that they have accepted in faith the statements and teachings of others in place of searching for the law that governs the phenomena. They constantly receive valuable messages from the living which lose their potency when credited to some departed soul who knew nothing of the subject to which the message relates. If a soul is capable of sending a message after leaving the body, it was capable of doing so while on earth. There is no logical reason for believing that any of the powers possessed by the soul are curtailed in this world and given freedom for action after it departs from the body. It is self-evident that these powers are not restricted. If they were, the medium would be unable to send and receive messages. Then there is no reason why one person, the medium, should possess this power and others be denied it. There can be no such distinction or restriction, for the law that governs one man governs all humanity. Are not all men made in the image of the Creator? And if I can communicate with man either in the body or out of it, other men can do likewise. Each and every man can and should be his own medium. If the mind of man is capable of receiving a message from a departed spirit or soul, it is also capable of taking a like message from the minds of other men. Then, if we are capable of receiving a message, we can just as well receive it from a soul imprisoned in a body as from one that has passed over the border. This being so, who can determine which message came from beyond the border and which from a mind still on earth? Thought and messages never die. We know that the influence and thoughts of great men are equally as potent today, if not more, than when they were on earth. I believe that most of the mistakes and errors made by spiritualists are due to attributing to the departed all the messages they received instead of giving credit to those of their friends who are in the flesh and interested in their welfare. Mentalism is the natural means of communicating with one another. It is the law by which thought, intelligence, is interchanged from mind to mind, soul to soul. Mentalism proves conclusively the immortality of the mind. Mentalism is a law upon which spiritualism is based. Mentalism removes the mystery in which spiritualism has been shrouded. It draws aside the cloak that has been used by unscrupulous persons to deceive and defraud the public and bring the name of the honest spiritualist into dispute. If spiritualists would explain to the public the phenomena in which they believe is caused by mentalism, and that the communications they receive are from minds of people on this earth as well as those beyond the border, and also explain how every man is his own medium because the law that governs one governs all, they would exterminate every impostor who is using the name of spiritualism with which to impose upon the credulous public. Clairvoyance means clear seeing. A clairvoyant is a person capable of deep concentration of thought. Through concentrating, he tunes his mental organization in harmony with that of people and thus receives thoughts and messages from them. Clairvoyance was supposed to be a distinct power or gift. This is not so, for each and every person possesses the same ability, though in a greater or lesser degree of development. Clairvoyance is mentalism in operation. A clairvoyant is the servant of others and often becomes a slave to the influence of the combined mentalism of the public. When this is the case, he soon loses all his individuality and willpower. The moment one acts in the capacity of a receiver of messages for others, he resigns his own will to theirs and thus loses his individuality. Every person should be his own clairvoyant, but he should not sell himself and sacrifice his will and independence to others for the paltry financial remuneration he would receive in return for it. A medium is another name for a clairvoyant, but it is most generally applied to a spiritualist who acts as a dispatcher and receiver of messages. For those who do not understand the law that governs the phenomena, the person acting in that capacity should rightly be called a mentalist and not a medium or clairvoyant. Telepathy is a name given to the transference of thought from the brain of one person to that of others. It is simply mentalism and has no characteristics or phenomena that is not governed by this law. Intuition is also another name of mentalism. An impression or an idea comes to one to act. He makes his decision without any apparent reason and follows it and finds that his intuition was correct. At another time, he acts contrary to these impressions and afterwards says, well, if I had followed my intuition, I would not have made this mistake. Many instances of this kind can be related by everyone. I have in mind a case where a gentleman suddenly received a desire to purchase the house in which he lived, though he could not explain to himself the reason for it. However, he wrote to the landlord and asked him if he were willing to sell it, and if so, upon what terms. He posted the letter at night, and on the following morning received one from the landlord with a suggestion that he purchased the house. Both letters were written at about the same time and had crossed in the mail. Another gentleman, while sitting by his fireside one evening, suddenly became aware of the whereabouts of one of his books, which had been missing for a long time. He was impressed with the feeling that it was in possession of a former friend who had moved some 30 miles away. Acting upon the spur of the moment, he wrote a note to the gentleman asking him if he had not borrowed the book. Next morning, when he came down to breakfast, on the table lay a parcel containing the very book, the whereabouts of which he flashed in his brain the previous night. The sender stated in a note that accompanied it that he had borrowed it and that it had been mislaid and only found that day. These were not coincidences. They were mental messages. Did you ever stop to consider what it is within you that prompts you, to which you give the name intuition? If you have these impressions, they are the evidence which proves that you are a natural mentalist and that you can and do receive messages from other minds. If you have been able to do this much without a knowledge of the law that guides them, you can, in short time, if you apply the law of mentalism scientifically, become a proficient mentalist. Thy faith hath made thee whole. Christ. Believe and love. A believing love will reveal us of a vast load of care. Emerson.